In over a dozen cases that have been ruled as suspicious drownings, a smiley face has been found near the body. The smiley face killer has been somewhat of a theory for a while, from 1997 all the way up to 2017. 45 bodies of college-age males have been found in 11 states, all in bodies of water. And many of these cases are strikingly similar. While police have just ruled this off as an accidental drowning, New York City detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, both extremely credible sources with about 40 years of combined experience, have been working hard to solve these unsolved cases. They believe for many reasons that police have ignored obvious signs that we have a serial killer or a group of serial killers on our hands, and that they could be potentially responsible for up to 335 cases. All of the victims have been male, college-age, athletic, popular, and high on academic achievements, so they suspect that these murders may be out of jealousy. Almost all of the bodies found show signs of dying on land, and come back positive for a roofie drug. So why were these ruled as an accident? Let's look at the cases. Part 2 to the smiley face killer. So first, let's talk about the case of Patrick McNeil. On February 16th of 1997, Patrick was last seen with his friends at a bar called the Dapper Dog. This is located in Manhattan's Upper East Side. After throwing up in the bathroom, he told his friends he was leaving and would be taking the subway back. And after that, no one saw Patrick again, and his body was recovered floating next to the Brooklyn Pier in the East River, 50 days later and 12 miles from where he was last seen. After looking at CCTV footage, he can be seen stumbling down the street and last seen turning left onto 90th Street. However, it doesn't seem like he's alone. A van actually follows pretty closely behind him, and when he stops to throw up, they stop too. After a witness got a partial view of the plate, police still refused to look for it because they thought it would be too expensive, and just dismissed it as an accidental drowning, even though his autopsy death was classified as undetermined. His blood alcohol level did not seem consistent with the state that he was in. That's when Detective Gannon promised Patrick's parents that he would find their son's killer or killers. Part 3 to the smiley face killer. So why didn't Detective Gannon think that Patrick had drowned? Well, police ruled it this way because of an overconsumption of alcohol. However, his blood level of alcohol was not extremely high, which would not have been consistent with him throwing up. He was recovered on his back, which is unusual for a drowning. Blood lividity is the process in which the person's blood will stop moving after the person is deceased. For example, if you die on your side, your blood will pool to the side. And even though he was found on his back, the blood lividity was absent from his back, which is where it would be if he had died in that position. He had thermal injuries on both his hands and torso as if he had been burned, and strangulation markings on his neck. The most telling thing, though, is that his feet and hands did not present any skin slippage, which would have been consistent with having been submerged for 50 days. Nor was he bloated, which is found in a lot of drowning cases. In fact, the signs on his body would have been consistent with him being in the water for only 24 hours. Gannon's theory? He was stalked, abducted, held for an extended period of time, murdered, and then disposed of in the water. Part 4 to the smiley face killer. So now let's talk about the case of William Hurley. In October of 2009, he called his fiancée to come pick him up from a sporting event, letting her know that he was feeling really tired and that his phone was about to die, but gave her his location just in case. She came, and he was nowhere to be found. His body was found 6 days later in the Charles River in Boston, Massachusetts. This man was a Navy veteran. Similarly to Patrick, surveillance footage showed him stumbling. But again, when examining his body, his blood alcohol level was very low. So they decided to test for a roofie, and he came back positive with GHB, which would have explained the stumbling for both of them with such a low alcohol level. Not only this, but his phone was smashed nearby him. He had blunt force trauma to the head and eye socket and behind his left leg. But again, police said he must have slipped, hit his head, and accidentally drowned. It's so suspicious to me that the police are just writing it off as an accident, even though this man was literally in the Navy and able to communicate his location. And the case that comes after this is somehow more mysterious. Part 5 to the smiley face killer. So the next case that we're going to talk about is Dakota James, who was literally a swim team captain. On January 5th of just 2017, he goes out to a bar with some coworkers, leaves to go home, and then is never seen again. 40 days later, his body is found in the Ohio River near Neville Island. On CCTV, he wasn't stumbling at all, just looking at his phone, and then walks towards an alleyway. 10 miles from this area is where his body's found. However, to have gotten there on its own, it would have had to travel through a dam, but his body didn't have a single scratch or bruise on it, which would have been consistent for going through something like that. Not only this, but again, there was roofie in his system, and Gannon even said it looked like there was strangulation marks on his neck. According to the autopsy, there was not enough water in his lungs to prove that he had drowned. And even though he had been missing for 40 days, his body only had 3 days of decomposition. To add to the spookiness, 11 smiley faces were found spray painted close to the bridge where his body was found. And again, shockingly, this was ruled as an accidental drowning. Part 6 to the smiley face killer. So there are so many cases that have been theorized to be victims of the smiley face killer. Another was Todd Geeb, who went missing in July of 2005 and was found in Lake Michigan 21 days later. He was found vertical in the water like it looked like he was standing, and his body only showed 2.5 days of decomposition. In 2006, Christopher Jenkins is another case found in the Mississippi River. Tommy Booth is another. Lucas Holman, Brian Welzian. The list goes on and on. And I could probably make 50 TikToks on this thing. So why haven't these been treated as a serial killer case? Well, there was a report that came out in 2010 debunking the theory and gave about 18 reasons why the smiley face killer doesn't exist. A huge reason being that drowning is the third most common cause of death in the US for mostly men. So I guess it does happen often. Also, a graffiti smiley face is pretty common. Whether the smiley face killer exists or not, these cases shouldn't have just been dismissed as accidental drownings. However, there is a first-hand story from someone who believes that they were a potential victim of the smiley face killer. And I'll be posting that story on the middle Reels tab of my Instagram. Check it out. Imagine TikTok being so powerful that they actually help you identify the person that almost murdered you. On my For You page the other day, I found this viral video that you guys might recognize, which states videos I took before almost being hunted and murdered. I clicked on her page, listened to her story, and was like, I have to know more. So I reached out and got the full thing. This is the case of Flowers Don't Growl. April 29th through April 30th of 2019, Taylor and her boyfriend Chris decided to take a trip to Falls Creek Falls, Tennessee. Taylor was 5 months pregnant at the time, so they figured they needed one last little trip before they were going to have a baby. And Taylor swore that Chris was going to propose. So that's why she documented so much of this trip, not even realizing that later on it was going to be used as evidence. So they set up at their assigned camping lot. They spent their time hiking, exploring, having fun. Taylor would collect flowers along the way to document it for memory's sake, but please keep these flowers in mind. And then on the second day, everyone from their assigned area was gone except for them. So they were more alone than before, or so they thought. Welcome back to part 2 of Flowers Don't Growl. So later in the night on their last day, they ended up hearing a loud crash. There's very windy roads nearby, so they figured that it was a wreck. And just to make sure kids weren't involved and that everyone was safe, they got out of their tent and ran over to the crash site, which was maybe half a mile away to go check on the people. The sheriff ends up showing up and it's like a DUI situation, but everyone ultimately was okay. So before heading back to their campsite, Taylor says she has to go use the restroom. So her and Chris walk over to the bathroom so she can do her thing, and in the distance they see a light flickering. And as it gets closer, they notice that someone is running with a flashlight. So they're both cracking jokes to each other like, oh my gosh, this guy really has to go to the bathroom. But once he approaches the restroom, he ends up stopping right at them instead of actually going into the bathroom. And states, and I quote, "Wow, you guys are fast." Creepy. Taylor notices that he has a weird smile on his face and feels really nauseous but just associates it with the pregnancy. So just to be nice, they continue to have a conversation with him, but ultimately this is where things go wrong. Part 3 on Flowers Don't Growl. So Chris and Taylor continue their weird interaction with this man. Chris explaining that they got to the wreck fast because they wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And the guy goes, yeah, I guess I'm just used to it. And Taylor's confused because like, used to what? Hikes? Car wrecks? They ask what he does, and he says he travels a lot and likes to go camping. And Taylor, starting to get very uncomfortable now, tells Chris that, hey, they need to go back to the campsite because the police will be over there waiting for their statements. Just trying to make an excuse to leave, and Chris could tell it was BS. And as they start to take steps back, he starts to take steps towards them, asking questions like, hey, how long are you guys going to be here for? And his hand kept playing with his hoodie pocket. Chris was starting to pick up on the message as they continued to walk backwards, while the man followed them forward. And then this guy decides to tell them a little story. He was like, car accident. It got me thinking this morning as I was hiking and I passed these flowers. I stopped because they were so beautiful and I heard a deep growl and it scared me. And it makes me think, you never know what day is going to be your last. That's when they saw the night. Part 3 on Flowers Don't Growl. So Chris and Taylor continue their weird interaction with this man. Chris explaining that they got to the wreck fast because they wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And the guy goes, yeah, I guess I'm just used to it. And Taylor's confused because like, used to what? Hikes? Car wrecks? They ask what he does, and he says he travels a lot and likes to go camping. And Taylor, starting to get very uncomfortable now, tells Chris that, hey, they need to go back to the campsite because the police will be over there waiting for their statements. Just trying to make an excuse to leave, and Chris could tell it was BS. And as they start to take steps back, he starts to take steps towards them, asking questions like, hey, how long are you guys going to be here for? And his hand kept playing with his hoodie pocket. Chris was starting to pick up on the message as they continued to walk backwards, while the man followed them forward. And then this guy decides to tell them a little story. He was like, car accident. It got me thinking this morning as I was hiking and I passed these flowers. I stopped because they were so beautiful and I heard a deep growl and it scared me. And it makes me think, you never know what day is going to be your last. That's when they saw the knife. Welcome to Flowers Don't Growl Part 5. So Taylor immediately recognized James L. Jordan as being the person that tried to attack her and her now husband that night. And horrifyingly enough, he ended up killing 2 weeks later, stabbing one female victim that did survive, but stabbing the male to death. The male victim ended up sending out an SOS last minute before he passed, and the police came to arrest Jordan. And honestly, one of the worst things was that he was not found guilty by reason of